Good evening. It's 8 p.m. on Saturday here in Singapore. I'm Olivia Quay with Haryanto Diman.
Now, we still don't have a definitive result in the US presidential election, but in the last 24 hours, Democratic candidate Joe Biden has overtaken President Donald Trump in two states, Pennsylvania and Georgia.
Let's have a look at the Electoral College map once more. Now, yesterday, those two states, Pennsylvania and Georgia, on the eastern side of the US were in pink, meaning Trump was getting the majority of the votes there.
But today, they're light blue, and so there are 4 light blue states. Now, in addition to Pennsylvania and Georgia, he's also keeping his grip on Nevada and Arizona. And these 4 battleground states currently hold the key to the presidential election.
In fact, Biden is widening his lead in Pennsylvania, Georgia and Nevada, but his narrow margin in Georgia is likely to trigger a recount.
Now, let's take a look at the last light blue state, Arizona. There, Biden's lead is diminishing, but analysts said Trump doesn't appear to be garnering enough of the outstanding ballots to overtake Biden. Meanwhile, in a 7-minute speech at his hometown in Delaware, Biden expressed confidence in winning the race and that he was on track to garner over 300 electoral votes. But he stopped short of declaring victory, yet did say that the numbers tell a clear and convincing story.
We don't have a final declaration of victory yet, but the numbers tell us it's clear, tell us a clear and convincing story. We're going to win this race. The tallies aren't just numbers. They represent votes and voters, men and women who exercise their fundamental right to have their voice heard. And what's becoming clear each hour is that record number of Americans of all races, faiths, religions chose change over more of the same. They've given us a mandate for action on COVID, the economy, climate change, systemic racism. They made it clear they want the country to come together, not continue to pull apart. We don't have any more time to waste on partisan warfare. You know, and more than that, we have such an incredible opportunity to build the future we want for our kids and our grandkids. I've said many, many times, I've never been more optimistic about the future of this nation. There is no reason we can't own the 21st century. We just need to remember who we are. This is the United States of America. And there's never been anything we've been unable to do, unable to accomplish when we've done it together.
Meanwhile, President Trump took to Twitter once more, railing again against his dwindling lead, making baseless claims that votes counted after Election Day were illegal and that instances of voter fraud were rampant.
Before Biden gave his speech, Trump tweeted, "Joe Biden should not wrongfully claim the office of the president. I could make that claim also. Legal proceedings are just now beginning." The Trump campaign has earlier mounted legal challenges to slow or stop vote counting in key battleground states. We're joined once more by Jeremy Yong, former US Bureau Chief for the Straits Times, and Nirmal Ghosh, US Bureau Chief, who is live in Washington, D.C. Good morning, Nirmal. Nirmal, the race is heating up and so are supporters from both sides. Now, we've seen protests and celebrations. What happened overnight on the ground and what can we expect today?
It was quite quiet overnight on the ground, but we can just expect more protests, and temperatures are getting a little heated now because this is taking so long. Now, the fact that it's taking so long is understandable because a lot of states are prioritizing accuracy over speed. That's what they say. And there's a lot of, there are a lot more absentee ballots from overseas armed forces, for example. There are provisional ballots, which are somewhat damaged or don't match the voter details, and they have to be worked on. So it'll just continue today, and probably around midday, we'll probably get a better sense of some of the numbers, some of the newer numbers. But I don't expect any spectacular development within the next couple of hours, frankly. It's essentially the status quo.
Right. Well, we heard Mr. Biden's speech from earlier. Now, aside from expressing confidence in winning the election and calling for unity as well, he revealed that he and running mate Kamala Harris are already making plans to address the most pressing problems in the U.S., COVID-19 and the economy. Let's have a listen.
Yesterday, Senator Harris and I held meetings with groups of experts on public health and the economic crisis this country is facing. The pandemic, as you also know, is getting more worrisome all across the country. Everyone to know on day one, we're going to put our plan to control this virus into action. We can't save any of the lives lost, any of those have been lost, but we can save a lot of lives in the months ahead. Senator Harris and I also heard yesterday about how this recovery is slowing because of the failure to get the pandemic under control. Our economic plan will put a focus on a path to a strong recovery.
Well, we also understand that Mr. Biden's advisors and allies are ramping up their conversations about who might fill critical spots in the cabinet. So, Jeremy, do you think this is all a bit too premature, or is it a good thing that the work is actually being done now, even though it's still before the election is called?
Ordinarily, I guess if it was any other election, any other year, I might say, yeah, you don't even know you're going to be president. Maybe you don't need to make this show of preparing for it. But this year is a little bit different for two reasons. One, the state of the race and how it's going to end. We've seen now, I would say, 36 to 48 hours, we've seen the general trend not change. In the first 24 hours, the trend did change. It was a red mirage, so to speak. Since then, we have seen it all trend the same way. Red states are becoming blue. Arizona, Trump is catching up a bit. That remains to be seen. But generally, the Joe Biden's lead, popular vote lead, has been increasing. He now leads in 4 out of the 5 most critical states left to be called. Everything is trending his way. If it stays this way, and so far it has stayed this way, it's really looking like more a question of when rather than who.
Right.
So in that situation, I don't think it's too bad a thing to start preparing. And the other reason why I think is perhaps not too premature for this year is just the size of the task that the next president is going to face is tremendous. And I'm not talking about so much just about the division, but whoever takes over, if it's Trump, if it's Biden, there's COVID, there's an economic crisis. In the US, 20 million people are unemployed right now, and they are hitting new records of new COVID cases a day. Whoever takes over will have to deal with this really on day one. There's no orientation time. So I don't think it is that premature in the sense, in any other year, we're at this point of the race, I would say we will start waiting for that concession call to come. And this concession call has actually been going back all the way through many, many years of US history, even when they were sending each other, congratulatory notes via telegram. And
Telegram, not the app, huh?
Not the app.
Actual piece of paper.
Actual piece of paper. So it's just that this year, just nobody thinks it's going to happen. That concession is not going to happen. This election is not going to end the same way. So to me, Biden is right to prepare a little bit. And I'm actually curious to hear, from Nirmal, what he thought of Biden's speech. Nirmal, it sounded a little bit like a victory speech without the victory part. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I think it's important for him he has to appear confident and statesmanlike, because Trump is in fighting mode. President Trump is in fighting mode, right? And as you said, he's not going to concede. I don't think he will actually ever concede. Even if he loses, he will say, I was, done out of it. It was unfair, given the kind of personality he is. But, Joe Biden has to appear to be working for the American people. And let's not forget that while all this has been going on, America has actually had 1,000 deaths from COVID per day for the last 3 days. So the pandemic is absolutely raging. I mean, some of these states have put quarantine measures back in place. New York City, Washington, D.C. are supposed to, of course, this being the states, it's difficult to enforce, individual rights and so forth take priority. But DC now requires reporting and quarantine if you're coming from another state. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and the economy, and Joe Biden can't be seen to be fighting, overly grasping for victory. Everything is going his way. He is on the brink. It's just taking a long time. And the other issue is that he has to inspire confidence in the process, which has been tremendously undermined by President Trump, one has to say. It's a somewhat of a poisoned chalice that Joe Biden is getting because of the severely divided country and the faith in the election being somewhat undermined. So he has to keep boosting that faith and credibility and confidence in himself.
Right. Let's shift our attention to Biden's lead in Georgia, because yesterday, Jeremy, when we were speaking to you during TBS, during our big story, the breaking news came in, right, where Biden has overtaken in Georgia. So let's talk about that. We didn't have an opportunity to talk about that yesterday. Now, the momentum he's gathering in the past 24 hours is pretty incredible, no? And given that Georgia has leaned Republican for 28 years. So, Jeremy, we want to ask, is Biden's lead down to, say, anti-Trump sentiments or pro-democratic votes?
Yeah, Georgia is quite significant, especially how Republican it has been for a very, very long time. And in fact, in the first day on election night, I don't think we were even talking about it because it was pink and everybody just assumed, okay, 30 years Republican, this will go to Trump. And today it is blue. Now, what are the factors that led to this? It's a variety of things. A little bit hard to say whether it's pro-Trump, anti-Trump, or pro-Biden. But okay, we have exit polls, fortunately, in Georgia alone that can help us try and make sense of what is at play here. So the first thing to know is that turnout is high this year. So there are a lot of people that did not vote before, that didn't vote in 2016, that are now voting. And this has broken quite evenly. Both sides have managed to bring new voters, people who didn't vote, into the election, into the system, and that's why you see this sharp spike in the number of votes. Now, where is Biden's lead coming from in Georgia? So they did a exit poll in Georgia, and they asked people, who do you vote for in the 2016 election? And we find very few people have switched from, I was voting Clinton, now I'm voting Trump, or I was voting for Trump, and now I'm voting for Biden. Because there was an assumption that it was Trump voters that were disillusioned with Trump, and then they were switching over. So the exit poll shows that only 6% of the people who voted for Trump last time are now voting for Biden. That's very small, especially since there were 4% of people who voted for Hillary Clinton and now voting for Trump. So it kind of almost evens itself out. This is not where the lead comes from. Where you see is the people who voted for a third party last time. This is not a big group, this may be about 5% of the voters. In 2016, they voted for a third party. There were stronger third parties then, not so strong this year. Among the group that voted for a third party last time, 62% voted for Biden this year. That is one block of votes that Biden got. The people who voted for third party in 2016 and now having to choose between one or two, he won a majority of that group. The exit poll also did exactly ask the question you asked me. Why did you vote for the person you did? Is it because you supported him or was it against somebody? In this case, only 30% of the people who voted for Trump said it's because they were against Biden. But 67% of the people who voted for Biden in Georgia said it was because they were against Trump. This is not surprising to me because Trump is a very much more polarizing figure. There's very few middle ground, people on the middle on Trump where they're unsure about him. People either really like him or really, really dislike him. So Biden is a much more neutral figure. So there is that middle ground. People who don't feel that strongly about him. They don't really like him. They don't really, dislike him. And so that shows you that, Trump does attract more passion one way or the other.
Okay, well, let's move. Well, on that note, let's go to the Trump camp. Now, his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, tested positive for COVID-19. And this comes as the U.S. hit a daily record of new cases for the third day running. So one bad thing after another for Trump. Nirmal, should Trump come out and say something to that effect, to address his chief of staff getting COVID, to address what his administration has been doing about COVID instead of ranting against, making false claims against voter fraud? Because he didn't appear yesterday. So should he make something? Could we see him make a speech today?
Maybe, but we get a lot of time is spent on what Trump should and shouldn't do. As far as he's concerned, he's addressed COVID, and COVID is under control. The vaccine is going to come within a matter of weeks. And he has recovered, and other people in his circle have had COVID and recovered, and it should not dominate your life, as we've been hearing since he had COVID and recovered. And he has said what he has had to say about COVID, and he has been using COVID to hit Joe Biden during the campaign, because Joe Biden said, "I've listened to the scientists, and if the scientists say lock down some sector of the economy, I will lock it down." So that part is over. There's not much fighting that Trump has to do on the COVID point. He's said what he has had to say. Just, if I may be permitted, just a very interesting analysis that was from Jeremy about Georgia. That was really well done. There are a couple of other factors sort of packed into that. One is the increasing diversity in Georgia, especially in metropolitan, Atlanta, and there is also Stacey Abrams, the African-American Congresswoman Stacey Abrams, who has been doggedly working for a number of years to increase voter registration among the African-American community, which has always been somewhat apathetic that any change at all will be coming. A lot of African-Americans say that 8 years of an African-American President Barack Obama didn't actually change our lives much. So there's an element of apathy there. So, there's a short digression back to Georgia. But coming back to COVID, your question, I think President Trump has said what he has had to say about COVID. And right now he is very preoccupied. He's fighting for his political survival, really. And I think COVID is not, he just shrugs it off as just one of those things. The tragedy about COVID is that, in a sense, it doesn't kill everybody. It doesn't kill you very fast and certainly, right? A lot of people do survive. So as far as Trump is concerned, what he has been saying is that we are learning to live with it. So that's his message. So he could say something about COVID, but I don't think so, because that would reveal the level of the pandemic in the States, which is not a very happy story at all.
Right. Jeremy, yesterday we chatted, to kind of round up our chat with during the big story. We talked about, we got to be patient, waiting for the results. Now I have to ask you again today, Jeremy, because, in 24 hours, a lot has happened in terms of overtaking the lead and all that. Jeremy, can we expect some sort of results, you reckon, today? Anything definitive at least?
I dare not hope, but every day you put me on the spot, you ask me this question, when are we going to get a result? I think it's anybody's guess. But I would say every day we have gotten closer and closer and closer. Yes. The vote counts now, the number of votes they've counted, you see it's 97%, 98%, 93%. We are almost there. I think just, as I said yesterday, everybody just has to be patient. It's a result is coming.
There's one...
Yes,
by the way,
ahead,
there's
Nirmal.
one deadline which we should keep an eye on. There's one thing to see statistically that who is going to win. We are not at that point yet, otherwise these races would have been called. We might get to that point in about 8 hours, maybe, with a couple of states. If it's a decisive state like Pennsylvania, game over. But that's statistical. There are still legal challenges to the process ongoing, right? December 8th is the deadline for all challenges to the election, all disputes to be resolved. So theoretically, legally speaking, this could remain unresolved until December the 8th.
Nirmal, has it ever, apart from 2000, has it ever gone that long? Do states normally get their act together faster, or is this year slower?
Yeah.
Same speed?
No, I think this year is not particularly slow, because some states are always slower than others. But in terms of the probability of the loser not conceding, I think it's very different. You know, the loser is going to fight tooth and nail in this case to try and somehow pull victory from the jaws of defeat.
Oh boy, December 8th is 1 month away.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we continue to wait and see, we want to thank Nirmal and Jeremy once more for joining us. We've been speaking to Nirmal Ghosh, our U.S. Bureau Chief in Washington, D.C., as well as former U.S. Bureau Chief for the Straits Times, Jeremy Yong. Well, you can, of course, visit straitstimes.com for all the developments in this nail-biting election. Our live blog and microsite feature a state-by-state breakdown, news developments, analysis, as well as social media updates.
We'll have an election update for you tomorrow night as well at 8 p.m. same time. Now, but if a president is decided before then, we'll bring the latest to you as soon as possible. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Have a good night and thank you for watching.